He's at 5.
Right? It's true.
Gotta.
True.
Okay,
All true.
we're live now. Woo! I don't know if anybody's actually like out there watching, but honestly, I don't care because I get to chat with you guys. Woo! Well, you gals, you ladies, you friends, you folks. I feel like for the sake of anybody watching this from the future and for each other, because I think most people here don't actually know each other. Where the Oh wow, I was hearing my own voice and I was like, where is that coming from? Okay, we're good now. I accidentally had a window open to like check that the stream was actually happening. Anyway, so let's do introductions. I can be sacrificed since like I put all of this together. And we can all just like volunteer to go from there. So I'm Care, Alexi. Yay, that's me. Everybody, most people watching already know who I am. And I'm a writer. I live and I work in the Caribbean. And I read books. I read lots of books. I like books. And I wanted to, previously I used this YouTube channel to do accountability crap for my writing, where people like Kirsten and Shayna were able, or have been able, to hold me accountable for the work I am or I'm not doing on my manuscript. But I got tired of just talking to myself and the chat. So I said, hey, let's do book club. It's more complicated than that, but like that's the nutshell. And I got a whole bunch of awesome women of color who love to read and many of whom also love to write. And I brought them together and I was like, let's read books together. And they all said yes. Yay. And here we are. Okay, one of you go next.
Well, I guess I'm next in the boxes, so I'll go.
Okay.
I'm Bree. I live in New York City, and Kira and I went to college together. I also identify as a writer. And did I say I'm a scientist? Scientist for my day job. And I love to read as well. So I was really pleased to get the invite to be here.
I'm next. I'm Gabriella. I live in Texas and also a writer connected with Kier through writing Twitter. I'm a chemical engineer for my day job and also have finally gotten back into lots of reading with the pandemic. It kind of like crash coursed me back into books, and that was awesome.
I guess me next. Hi, I'm Shayna Begay. I care through college, like way back in undergrad days. Let's see, I am an aerospace engineer by day and a mock writer by night, mostly just a really big fan of reading. And lately, through the pandemic and everything, I've been focusing a lot on nonfiction and like more so leadership style books because I find myself more in the realm of trying to understand the concept of leadership. So you'll probably hear a lot about that later on as we talk about Raybearer. But yeah, that's me.
Okay, I guess I'm next. My name is Kirsten. I'm Kier's cousin. I am an avid reader, obviously. And I've got my 2 cats. This is also Raish here with me. And Batman is somewhere. During the pandemic, really, I have been getting back to reading as well. Finally. Just finished my schooling, actually, for nutrition consulting. So finally have time to read. And I also knit in my free time. I guess that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, yeah, I had muted myself like a fool. Yay! Okay, that's most everybody. We're expecting Seidel as well, who will hop on in a little bit. She was running a little bit late. But in the meantime, we can jump into stuff. I'm going to read, if I'm not totally a mess right now. Okay, I'm going to read the blurb for Raybearer by, I really hope I pronounced the name correctly, Jordan Ifueko. If you see this and I mispronounce it, I'm really sorry. I did my best, I promise. Okay, so the blurb at the back goes, only one thing is more powerful than a wish, and that is a purpose. Technical difficulties, give me a second. Okay, no, stop it. Okay, only one thing is more powerful than a wish, and that is a purpose. Tarisai has always longed for the warmth of a family. She was raised in isolation by a mysterious, often absent mother known only as the Lady. The Lady sends her to the capital of the global empire of Aritsar to compete with other children to be chosen as one of the Crown Prince's Council of 11. If she is picked, she'll be joined with the other council members through the Ray, a bond deeper than blood. That closeness is irresistible to Tarisai, who has always wanted to belong somewhere. But the Lady has other ideas, including a magical wish that Tarisai is compelled to obey: kill the Crown Prince once she gains his trust. Tarisai won't stand by and become someone's pawn, but is she strong enough to choose a different path for herself? Dun dun dun. Okay, so that's the blurb. This book, Sai has arrived. Hi, Saidel.
Hi.
So Sai, we did like a little round of introducing introducing ourselves. Yes, ourselves. So before we hop straight back into Raybearer, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, and then Gabby gets to go first. I don't know. I've actually never called you Gabby. Is Gabby a thing? Can I call you that? No.
Gabby's not a thing. I go by Gabriella. If my
That's
mother
fine.
finds out that anyone calls me Gabby, she like comes and like sits on my shoulder and judges.
Gotcha.
She
Okay,
had a
Gabriella.
whole spiel about it, but I won't subject y'all to it. Just
That's fine. I just like also now. Oh, Sai, what just happened to Saidel? She got cut off. I don't know. That's fine because like I've also never thought of you as as Gabby, so that's cool. Also, Talia has also finally arrived. Hi. I don't know where Saidel went. Whatever. The first meeting is always going to have its weird ass glitches, right?
So
So-
Saidel tried to join the Ray, but the Ray rejected her.
Oh,
Yikes. Okay, here we go.
oh, we're back.
There we go.
Saidel is back.
Sorry about
Okay,
that, guys.
We're good. I'm like playing around with how we set up. Okay, so we already almost all introduced ourselves. I think it's just Talia. Talia, we are live. Like you should know this before you accidentally like flash everybody with your butt or something.
We all
Right?
have pants on today, right?
No.
I
Yes.
Yes.
I'm with my husband.
No breaking of the internet today, please. I need to work on the internet. But we all already introduced ourselves. So Saidel, why don't you go first, since you were here-ish first before Talia, and then Talia can go next. And then we've already read the blurb for Raybearer, and I'd really like Gabriella to jump in because it was her pick.
Absolutely. Okay, so hi guys, my name is Saidel. I am from Trinidad originally, but I live in New York right now. I am a creative of all sorts. I make all kinds of things: art, film, TV, all kinds of things. I write, and I'm also a paralegal. So yeah.
Your turn, Talia.
I am also from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm a domestic goddess, aka housewife. I read, I write. I am mostly a consumer, but I have begun to, well, I shouldn't say begun. I have started back producing. I used to write very terrible poetry. Now I write mediocre fiction for now. It needs polishing.
Okay.
Like
All
any
right.
time when it requires some polishing, right?
It's true. It's true. All right, Gabriella.
All right, so I'll lead in. I picked Raybearer because it was the first book that I've read in a while that I just like picked up and read cover to cover in 5 hours of just intense absorbing of the book, and it made me really happy to see the pursuit of justice not being like a childish thing that everyone shrugs off as, oh, we're gritty and real and justice doesn't matter. And it was like, no, justice does matter and doing the right thing is important. And that's what we're here for. And that kind of made me really happy to see in a fantasy book and not have it be really just grim dark and everything is bad and there is no goodness in the world. So yeah, that and not punishing angry girls for being angry, that made me happy. So I think those are my two biggest takeaways from Raybearer and what I enjoyed about it. It was kind of a a blur of inhaling a beautiful world and just having it wash over me in one big wow. I don't know how she's doing it, but it's amazing.
So I read it for 5 hours today because I'm forever a procrastinator. But I kind of needed that pressure. But it was good because, like you said, I got it all in one dose. But I'll just start really quick by saying when I read the blurb, I got mad like Ella Enchanted, Rapunzel vibes. But I was really surprised with how deep and vibrant and unique the story was. And so I think it was a great pick.
Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in on what they thought of it, like as an overview in a big way?
I loved it.
Well,
Wow, it took. I don't want to say it took me by surprise, because that would something about saying that it took me by surprise would feel very, very wrong. I thought it was very rich, very layered. I felt like there were a lot of various shades of brown and black being represented not as a monolith, which is a word I feel like is overused, but they are presented. I can almost see hints of India, hints of Africa, parts of China. I can see the Caribbean being represented, and it didn't feel like
window dressing.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think has been a really big deal recently. And I think will continue to be a really big deal. Just to bust some files, I knew exactly when Talia was reading this book because she messaged me and she went, "I had never been spanked before. I thought it sounded exciting," which is a line from the book. And she followed that quote with, "And that's how kinks are born." So, like, y'all, don't let this whole domestic goddess shit fool you, okay? Like, I'm opening all the files now. And I'm honestly really happy to have that kind of conversation too, where we're not just like, yes, the themes, justice. Like, I'm cool to just talk trash also.
Well, I also like that there was a lot of representation, not just in, color and culture. And we can definitely talk about the different cultures within the realm that were so beautifully described, but also with asexuality and child freeness and the choice to procreate, because, I identify as child free. And so I really like that there was a little bit of that where, Tarisai was questioning, do I really want to have children? And so I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah. I have a list because that's who I am. But does anyone before I know I talk, y'all, does anyone else want to say anything before I just start opening my mouth for the next, 5 minutes?
I mean, I'd like to kind of share something. So
yeah,
I kind of struggled. So I was struggled a little bit with getting into the book for the first few chapters, and it took me a while to kind of finally find a rhythm with it. I think it was mostly just because I just had a hard time identifying with the main character, and I think it wasn't until she finally arrived at the children's palace that I kind of started to understand a little bit better about Tarisai and what she was kind of going through and what and this world that she was kind of in. It took me a little while to appreciate it and to get into it, I'll say. But by the end of it, I just felt like just kind of felt like everything kind of coming together. I really appreciated the world building and just how diverse the culture was, but it didn't feel inauthentic. It felt very real. And stuff. And so it wasn't until the end that I kind of started to recognize some of the themes that were going on and didn't feel as much like a child who was separated and lost from the world. So that was kind of for me, that was my perspective coming into the book, and it was a little bit of a struggle, and then I finished it 30 minutes ago.
I yeah. Oh, you all did that. I read this we sorted out our reading schedule, and then I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited, and I read the book the next day. Some kind of weirdo. I read it and I made my notes because I was like, oh, I read it too early, I'm gonna forget, and I made notes, and then I left it alone.
Chapter 18 to 34 today. 18 to 34.
I feel like I'm not the procrastinator I used to be, clearly. What is
Congratulations.
What's your secret?
The secret was honestly just excitement. Like I was excited to sit down with you folks and talk about this. Sai and Kirsten, do you guys have anything to add before I
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I really loved everything that you guys already said about the book as well. But the world building for me was great because I struggle a little bit with my own identity because I've lived for so long now because I've moved from Trinidad to Canada in a predominantly white community. So my own culture, I struggle with kind of losing that, and reading this book, I was almost in tears when they would describe fried plantain and things like that. And I was like, I need to go see my grandma right now. That's what I loved about the book.
I was raving about the book to my husband, Miguel, on the way back from the pharmacy. And I said, let me tell you what I love about this book. So there's this scene, right? And there's this party, and it's these, upper class people, and they're, because they're the top of society. And, the girl just casually plucks fried plantain from off of a tray that a server passes by. And it's like, fried plantain is the food of the gods, quite frankly. Why does it not get the respect that it deserves in the culinary world? And I spoke about that from Super Farm in Valsayn to my home in Aranguez. And
most people in this chat do not know what that is, what that distance is. I think you need to give it to them in minutes.
Plantain is like a starchy banana.
No, not the distance. Tally at the distance. Nobody else knows where.
It was half an hour. Sorry, it was like half an hour drive, and my poor husband is being regaled with this one. It wasn't even much scene. It was like part of a sentence. You know what I mean?
I get you.
It's like, fried plantain does not get the respect it deserves. And I felt a little sorry for him. But he's like, oh, well, I really want to start back reading. I haven't read a novel in years. I've just been doing tech stuff. I think this book will be a good start. And I'm like, fried plantain as a muse?
Yeah. I don't know if y'all are hearing my cat yell at me in the background. Oh, my husband has arrived. He is saying, Care is always a fast reader, even with books she doesn't enjoy. That's true. I'm known to spite read, but that's a different conversation. Sai, do you have anything you want to add before I pull out a couple of the things?
Yeah. Similarly, I also had a hard time starting, not because I wasn't connecting. It just something about the first two chapters just felt kind of disjointed in the style, and I was like, I don't know that it just felt disconnected. But then as it amped up, I was like, this is great. I am going to do all of this. And I tried to slow myself down so I would only read on the train so that I wouldn't finish early. And so I finished today. But I enjoyed this weird part of it where she describes the drum talking. So I have a background in folk and folk dance and folk music. And so reading someone describe a reading someone describe drum talk was just, it rekindled something in me because I've been out of that world for maybe 3 years now. It was just really, the similar kind of effect as thinking about plantain. It just birthed a fire of home and wanting to be in that space again, and remembering how kind of important some of those traditions are that don't really exist here in the mainstream America, in the mainstream New York. It's just not a thing. So
yeah, that's awesome.
If I had any hangups getting started, it was definitely the names and the pronunciations, but I actually switched to the audiobook, which the narrator was fantastic, and it made it a really great experience as well. So that actually helped me get engaged in the story, because at the beginning I didn't have to think about how to pronounce Tarisai and all the names, and it was being read to me. And then by the time And by the time they got to the children's palace and then the story got kicked up, then I'm like, oh, now I'm really invested.
Yeah, because I pronounced it when I was reading the blurb just now, and I'm like, shit, I don't know if this is right. But
It is Tarisai. It was in the audiobook.
Is it Tarisai? Okay.
They have. Did you guys didn't read the back because they have the entire glossary thing in the back with how to pronounce.
I had an
names.
ebook.
Oh,
so I didn't get to just like. I didn't get to do
the book.
I mean, I only saw it once I got to the end of the book, and then I thought, oh, I did pretty well actually. So.
Yeah, I didn't even look at it. I was like, well, it's too late now.
I pronounced Sanjeet's name correctly from the get-go.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but that's because Oh, so Brendan says that he has been here. Which reminds me, I didn't actually reach out to anybody who might actually be watching and wants to engage with us in the chat. So if you are here and you're watching and you'd like to say things, feel free to send us a message and say hi in the chat so that we don't just like sit here and talk to each other and ignore you, because that'll be kind of shitty. I have a lot of feelings. About this book. Fry Planted, yes, certainly some of my feelings were around Fry Planted. But I felt like there were just these, because I also had a hard time at the beginning, and I think that was also structural. Like as a writer, and I don't know if Gabriella or Talia or anybody else who writes wants to chime in on this, but we are taught that we're punished for certain things in traditional publishing and in mainstream publishing. We are kind of punished for like info dumps, and we're punished when the story starts in the wrong place and stuff like that. So I read like the first chapter or two, which wasn't set out as a prologue either. I think it was directly chapter 1, wasn't it? Yeah. So I read those things and I was just kind of like, can I get away with it? Because I think this is a debut novel, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yes.
It is? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it is. So I think my hang-ups in the first couple chapters wasn't so much that I like disliked them. I was just like, why am I reading this? Because it's clear to me that this is background information that I may not need necessarily, and that I never get straight up front like this in most trad pop books, because they're like, no, don't do that, it's boring. So I had a lot of feelings about that as like a writing style, but I also really appreciated all of the groundwork that it laid for the rest of the book, right? It laid out just kind of all of those important things that we really needed. And I literally just have a list here of like crazy things that smacked me about the book. The name or the lack thereof for women in the royal family. Everyone who assumed that Tarisai would, and you said it was Tarisai, right? Yeah, okay, cool. So everyone would just assume that Tarisai will say yes to being anointed, and just kind of presuming her path and her desires at the beginning. I was reading that, and I promise you that there was a moment where I read somebody, I think it was Sanjeet, in fact, who, oh, by the way, anybody watching, spoilers, you should know that. Spoilers. I think Sanjeet had said something like, oh, like, well, when you decide, like when you accept that you get anointed, right? And I was just like, bitch, what if she don't want to? I was so upset. I was just like, I was not happy with that. In general, like the role of women and how women's achievements were erased, like just the erasure of that entirely, the manipulation by the lady, all of these inequalities. Also, like that age gap between Wuin and Kira.
I had the same thought. So wait,
Yeah.
so pause. Because when they arrived back at the house and they're together, and I'm like, this seems like it's more than just they came back together, and then it unfolds that okay, there was a little bit of a attraction. I'm like, but she's the same age as Tarisai, so she's 16-ish. He belongs to the lady, and she old. So,
But she was a son.
Where
She was
he
a
found
son
him as
figure.
a baby, right?
She was a son figure. He thought of her as the mother.
Yeah. So she picked him up when he was when he was a kid, like a kid, like 11, straight out of the portal.
Yes.
He's not that much older than them.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think that That's a fake out. Let me explain why I think so. Because when he's introduced to Tarisai, who is 11 or 12 at the time, doesn't look at this guy and think, oh, he's a child like me, right? She sees him as like a grown-up. He's an authority figure. And I'm sorry, but like 3 or 4 years, even 5 years older, for a kid like Tarisai, who was a very strong-willed, very fuck you kind of gal, right? Like, I cannot imagine that he was anything less than at least like adultish. Like, he was very adult-like. And that was the impression I got.
Consider what he went through, though. He literally went through hell. He went through literal hell.
That's worse.
And trauma ages you. Trauma ages you. It forces
But
him.
that's worse. That means that he is not just in like physical age older than Kira. He's also like significantly more mature than most human beings.
But that doesn't mean that he wouldn't have missed that. How long he was?
I don't know if he missed it or not. What had to do anything? Big man going to trauma and then missed it.
I read something about this. I read something about this.
Hold on.
I agree. I agree that
I'm absolutely not excusing this. I'm absolutely not excusing this, right? But this book did character-driven writing from the get-go, from chapter one. Chapter one, you get like, okay, this is my first few memories, and I'm trying to collect my thoughts, and that is how some people, like, I'm trying to remember something, I'm trying to share memory with you. And if you know me, I will go through everybody's backstory, right? About how my grandmother come to Trinidad and about whatever. You will hear all that backstory, and to me, that is kind of the vibe I got. And Rowan, like some people who've been through trauma, they take like a couple steps back emotionally at certain points in time. And so he is seeing this girl as being something like, okay, I can reclaim this part of myself through her, which is literally what happened.
Well, I can give another.
I never said it was just and it was right, because just and right things don't happen in real life.
Fair. All right.
But an alternative way to look at it as well is these kids are being raised to be royal delegates. And so, yeah, they're 16, 17, but they're being treated like high judges and priestesses. And so, yes, they're 17, but it's another culture, it's another world entirely. So maybe the maturity levels are kind of different, and maybe it's not looked upon as differently there.
That's okay. I'll give it that. That means very little when it comes to like the little creepy vibes that would crawl up my spine when Wuwen was like, Kira. Like I was not.
I definitely had a moment right there where I was like, huh?
Yeah.
See, but like that didn't even throw me. Like I totally saw it when it was like, I was like, when like they first came back in together, and I was like, yeah, no, they're totally like each other. I can tell. And then later on, when it revealed, I was like, no, I see that, because the way that I perceive Kira is that she's, out of everyone, all the kids in the children's palace in this younger generation, she's probably like the most mature. So to me, she's like going to be attracted to someone. Yeah, she's the motherly figure of everyone else. But then I also kind of feel like she's a person or a character that really represents, the revealing of truths, right? And so, she's not afraid to admit things that are true and to accept the things that she, that she likes or that she's interested in. And also like just her respect for tradition and everything. So I kind of feel like she'd be attracted to someone who's older because of, she sees his truth and she sees the pain that he's been through and wants to kind of help heal that.
Wasn't Kira's backstory also she came from a poor village? She didn't always have everything she needed. So remember, trauma binds trauma. And so, she can connect with him on that. You suffered, you went through hell. I didn't always have food, so things like that.
I get that. But like, it comes back to kind of the idea of these like really good, like good woman being like having a relationship with a good woman is like therapy for traumatized men. Like I have feelings. I don't I don't not understand it. I don't not understand like its tool and its place in this world and the writing and the opportunity to give Buin and Kira both kind of like set them up for what's coming next with Songland and all of that. I get it. I just gives
Don't
me
like
icky
it.
feels, man. Yeah, it just gives me icky feels. It just makes me feel icky. Like
I don't
like
know.
I
I
gotta
didn't,
put a deodorant on or
I didn't
something.
feel that.
Knowing that- Sorry.
No, Brie was saying she doesn't feel that way, Talia.
My ick factor came from knowing that Owen was the lady's person. So I'm like, oh my goodness, she's literally sleeping with the enemy.
Well,
That
I mean,
was what threw me, and it's like, isn't he much older? Because I didn't go back to get like, okay, well, this age would have lined up, and what you said made sense. And like my ick factor came from, how dare he do this to Kira? You know?
Although I want to be the one to say this, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I love morally ambiguous antagonists. And so I actually really like the lady. I
Yes.
liked her character building. I liked her character arc. I like that you liked her, then you didn't like her, then you liked her, then you didn't like her. And in the end, it's a tragic story. She's not going to have a positive character arc, but she was complex, and I liked her character. I did.
Yeah.
I loved her.
I
would. She reminds me of my mom, though.
oh god, listen, that's a different story.
Oh.
Yeah, bringing your
I would never want the lady to be my mother, but I like her as an antagonist.
Yeah. I think I don't think I liked the lady, but as a reader, I was like, God damn, this manipulative bitch. Like, I was not happy with her at all. As a writer, I do agree. She was fantastic. She was great. She was well done. But also, for all the bad feelings I had about her and about what she was doing, like as a person, I understood it. And that's
the best antagonist is the protagonist in their story. She
Exactly.
had a purpose, and she was done wrong. So it's like her seeking vengeance or seeking justice wasn't necessarily wrong. How she was doing it was probably wrong, and we can discuss that. But the problem too was she ever really equipped to do it right? I don't think she was, and that's where Tarisai came in. She was equipped. The younger generation was equipped to come in and do what the adults couldn't do. So she was always going to be tragic, but she wasn't necessarily wrong because she was done dirty. So
yeah. It's
Like-
a Killmonger kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I saw in her was that she never had agency.
The lady.
She literally never had agent. Think about it. She would have been a Raybearer, and that was literally taken from her. Right? She could have been. She saw it.
not only that, she was kept as a pet. She was a pet.
She was a pet.
She wasn't even a human.
She wasn't even a person. Like, she didn't even
No.
have her own personhood. How is she going to take that lesson and give it to her children when she didn't have it? She did not have a model for that. And she did the best she could while
With
trying
what
to
she
play
had.
chess and not checkers. You know what I mean? She tried. I mean, she like, she tried so hard and she got so far, but in the end,
It didn't even matter.
Did we really have to go
it
there?
mattered for a child. And when you talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, sometimes you just have to stand on the shoulder of the dwarf that your parent was, and just see, that extra 3 feet that you could have ahead of you, because there's literally no model that was presented that she could have said, okay, well, my mom did this and this was right, and I can see this. There's nothing that was right in her situation. She literally didn't even have a name.
But then it's going to go
but
also.
none of them had a name, right? So if we look back, if we remember the story of, I can't remember the name of the empress. I know it was Ayo something.
Ayatoro.
That's it, Ayatoro.
Yeah.
So Ayatoro wasn't Ayatoro until she became empress, right? Because
And
people
it was
were
by a
arguing.
technicality. They had no choice.
Yes.
They would have never done it otherwise. They would have
Yes.
made her disappear the same way they made the lady disappear.
Exactly. And when she finally came to the throne, people were arguing over what they get to name her. with the assumption that she's a woman and therefore she's not really going to be a ruler. So whoever gets to give her the name that they want, they get to
pull the puppet strings, essentially.
Exactly, Seidel. They get to pull the puppet strings. So the amount of injustice against women that really happens in this book, and the fact that even the council, my God, I'm about to like choke on my excitement, clearly. The whole council, the role of the women in the council is, oh well, you might bear greatness one day, but you ain't never gonna be great.
That makes me so mad.
Tarisai literally says that they're just broodmares. That's all they are.
Yes.
When she got up in front of everybody, so this came up like 3 times. I counted it. It came up 3 separate times where they first said like you could bear one. Then they said we expected you and him to hook up. And then they brought it up again in public. And I had a moment where I was like, yes, queen. When she stood up and said, I am married to justice and to being the high council. And like, I am not, I'm going to bring justice to Aritsar and that will be my child. And I was like, yes, that's me. Like I identify with you right now.
So she raised her entire life to infiltrate that court to get close to him, right? So what she had to do was say, yes, I will be part of your court. And as soon as people started with that nonsense about you can be a greatness, she's like, the hell with that. Like my purpose is 2 centimeters ahead of me, right? 2 centimeters. And as soon as they say, oh, well, you should, like, I good. I real good.
Yes, a West Indian child.
Like and I have a son like that, so I know exactly what's that like. Do not tell me what to do. And I saw that in her. And another thing I saw is the lady was a way better ruler than her brother, who for me and my purposes shall remain nameless because he don't deserve a name. Right? He is better. She is better than he could ever be. Right?
Which is a real mirror for Tarisai and the Prince. There you go, Dio. And I have his name right here.
Yeah. And I'm looking at that and all I can think of is Rosalind Franklin and that joke. What did Watson and Crick discover? I get so mad at men like that. Like, what did they discover? Rosalind Franklin's notes. But who won the Nobel Prize?
Well, and we saw this with Tarisai as well when she wanted. They were in the Children's Palace, and he made the ruling about why the Sanjit's people were always behind in classes and things like that. And he's like, oh, we'll get them extra tutoring. And she was going to speak up because she's like, no, it's because of the sleeping and the eating and we can reform how we're just doing our daily tasks. But she stopped herself. She questioned herself. And,
is there a woman in this group who doesn't understand that moment?
Of silencing your own voice because you don't know if people are even going to hear you seriously.
Yeah.
I think every one of us.
When they got to the end and they were chanting her name as the just, I think I literally cried. Like, cause when she like owned that moment where she like came out with like her ruling and completely like turned everything upside down.
So it was a mirror moment. It was a total mirror moment in that moment because it's like she didn't question herself. She came in, she says, this is my ruling, this is it. So those two, I connected those two and I'm like, that's such a beautiful dichotomy. Like no voice, the voice.
That's also like epic storytelling for character growth because you have like the clear example at the beginning and then you have the moment of growth where like
goosebumps.
Everything, it's like dominoes, just like plink, boom. It was fantastic. Yeah.
And then you saw in the beginning where like again that disjointedness, like that. I read this book twice last week because that disjointedness in the beginning made sense for her character growth. It's like, who am I? What are my thoughts? What is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? And then,
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I see it, but I don't know if I agree with it.
It's like a typical child moment. Like,
okay,
all right. And then at the end, no, this is how we're gonna do it. I don't care if it's never been done before. Everything has never been done before, so this is the first time it's gonna happen. If it's gonna happen under my watch, it's going to happen under my watch. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And I saw that you began in like a little chaos, that primordial super thought kind of thing, and then you end with this thing. I would go through hell if it will bring peace. There's a clear path, right or wrong, that she decided, because again, there were moments of doubt, that fire that rose in her that she quenched herself, to come to the end and be literally,
I want
to
to
be
ask
a
Sheena.
hero.
I want to ask Shayna about the leadership, like the themes of because I think that because Shayna mentioned earlier that she's been doing a lot of reading around like leadership and like what that means and developing yourself as a leader and all of that. And I want to ask Shayna to kind of share her thoughts on that as a theme.
No, I think it's a pretty strong theme actually, because you have these children that are sent from all over the realm and are being picked essentially to be the leaders for the next generation, right? And so there's this whole archetype of, we have this trust in these young people, or putting this trust in these young people to, be the leaders of the future. And it was kind of, to me, it was interesting because one, it's kind of showing all at once that like, oh, okay, so you have this strong feeling for where leadership is, is to be balanced between the Raybearer and his 11, right? But then you kind of have this patriarchy where, oh, it's all about the Raybearer. And so, by the end of it all, I kind of feel like you have Tarisai, who is like struggling to kind of see how she fits in this, because she has this stroke of leadership. So like in that time, when they're talking about, how the course of the day is set out and how people from, these areas of the realm, these different realms are struggling because they're furthest away from where they need to get to their tasks or to eat or whatever and stuff. And so she has that silencing moment where she has a different opinion, and she wants to make a leadership decision on her own, but she doesn't have that voice in herself to do it. But then by the end of the book, she's able to, stand up in front of, this giant court and kind of, lead, this court progression, with a very strong voice and stuff. And so I kind of saw a lot of leadership growth where you doubt your own thoughts and your own feelings as a leader, to where you feel strong in your opinions enough to say it in front of large crowds of people. So I see a lot of, leadership growth there, but then I also see this theme of thinking about leadership as this concept of balance, right? Where by the end of the book, we learn that, we don't want just the Raybearer, but you have Dio who says, no, I need you to lead with me, because, you kind of help complete myself for this picture of, what we need in order to have this united realm. And so that's actually a theme that I talk a lot about in people, and that there's this concept in my culture, so I'm a member of the Navajo tribe, in that, we have this story that we tell where, leadership is not about being, one type of leader or another. It's about having this balanced skill set of being able to be a matriarch, being able to take on the signs of the patriarch, someone who's a warrior, someone who's a caretaker, someone who understands, peacetime as well as wartime, like what you need to be able to do to be that strong leader. And that's really what good leadership looks like, is someone who can bounce between all those different concepts.
Awesome. I'm really glad I asked you that question.
I was prepared for it.
Yes. BL has entered, and he asks, assuming this person I think it is, that I'm late. Are there cliff notes? Does anybody want to volunteer to try for cliff notes? I can try, but Gabriella, do you want to give it a shot? Maybe Saidal or Kirsten. Okay, fine, I'll do it. So the cliff notes are.
I just I've been thinking too much.
The cliff notes are that this was a really fantastic book, and we all loved it. We all had these little parts of the world building throughout it that really made us feel connected to it as women of color and as people from like non-Western cultures, or who grew up in feeling connected to non-Western cultures. And it's a really great narrative of saying bring the patriarchy, Basically, yeah. There's a lot of there are a lot of like small signs around how women's achievements are erased and around how the role of women is kind of undermined, and women aren't given their due credit, etc. That's really dealt with well, honestly, from like the realism of Tarisai feeling like she shouldn't be speaking up and she shouldn't be, using her voice, all the way to Tarisai taking her place and owning her voice and owning her role, not just as, was it High Justice or High Judge or something like that, but also eventually as what she should be, which is an empress, right? Which is a co-ruler, part of a team. I also want to say that I really enjoyed, is it Dio or Deo?
I say Dio.
Dio.
Yeah.
Dio.
I also really enjoyed Dio's character because he could really easily have become an asshole like his pops, and he wasn't. Which is he
encouraged Tarisai to use her voice, even when she doubted herself.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was very gentle. He was a gentle character.
Yeah. And I think he also he was the ace representation, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was asexual, yeah.
I really appreciated it. I was just like, this is everything I didn't know that I needed.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to ask Saida.
I would just want to say, so he was asexual, yes, but then he was also like the complete opposite of his father, in that he didn't have that toxic masculinity. And I love that.
Yeah. And even something I actually just thought of while Shay was talking not too long ago, Sanjeet's character, I thought was really interesting. As a love interest, he was cool, but I think that he also kind of presents the opportunity for us to examine that Tarisai was not the only one who was just being kind of pushed in a certain direction, because Sanjeet didn't want to be violent. He wanted to be a healer, and he became a general of armies, and all of those things. And I think that's another something for us to kind of consider and be critical about, sort of in real life, like how we just push children. We just kind of push them in the direction we think that they should go, right? Like I ended up in STEM because I was good at it.
But it also makes the argument for people who are, I can't remember where this quote is from, but it's about kind of like the people who make the best leaders are people who don't want to lead, in the sense of like people who aren't looking for power usually know how to dispense that balance best. And so his desire not to fight, his desire to seek peace and seek healing may have made him, in truth and in fact, the best person to lead the army, to lead the generals, to be the general, because he is now not looking at any opportunity as an opportunity to go to war, but with true diplomacy.
Yeah, and there's a nice like contrast there between the 12 of the new generation and the 12 of the old, right? Because all the names are just sort of flitting out of my head, but the guy
you can do their titles. You can do like the High Judge.
The High Judge, yeah. So the Emperor's High Judge was like, there's no justice, only order, right? And then there was Tarisai, who's like, no, bitch, like justice.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you take away the female version of, the emperor and the empress,
when you lose balance,
you have the single one. So now you have the men just calling the shots, and it just became corrupt. And I mean, we see this in real life all the time. So it was very evident. It was sad, because I think it reflects a lot of what we see in the real world. But every time the High Judge came on, I just
yeah. Kirsten, do you have? Sorry, Talia. Because Kirsten has. I know she had a lot to say because she had messaged me about that. So I was just wondering if there's anything you wanted to say or add so far, because you and Gabriella. I know Gabriella has her own stuff happening, so I don't know if that's why you might be a little more on the quiet side. But if there's anything you guys want to add or say, please jump in.
No, I mean, you guys have pretty much covered everything that I was already thinking, so.
Okay, that's cool. I think I had interrupted Talia.
Oh, I interrupted myself when I realized that other people were about to speak. It's a tragic flaw of mine that I speak over people. But like there's a lot. Like I, as a parent, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. I also have a bonus, a much older bonus. But the 5 and 3, when I became a parent, there was this one moment of clarity that I had in between the whole postpartum depression and anxiety, and I'm like, how much of parenting, especially toxic brown and black parenting, and y'all will understand when I'm finished with this sentence, how much of that is ego-based? Anybody here
is ego-based? No, that's, I mean, I haven't, but I understand.
So my like not just, I'm saying my mother because that's my personal experience, but like a lot of people, it's either the look or the pinch. And when you're in public and acting up, what's the first thing they say? Do not embarrass me.
You are a reflection of me when you leave the house. I heard that every time.
Yes.
No, I can't get my ball from next door and teach some plum, but I am not so so take the ego out of it. And that is exactly how the previous generation in this book tried to lead. They tried to lead with their ego. Otherwise, why erase the lady? Why erase the lady? Why erase
all history?
Yeah.
Why?
All their history was edited with unification.
Why do you need to edit a history if it reflects badly on your ego versus Dio? And this is where
How Empire works, right?
Exactly.
This is what Dio, when he was like, no, I need you, I need your wisdom. What were you going to say? Oh, that was great. And when I saw that, I'm like, he's being strategy focused, he's being end goal focused, and I don't want to say he doesn't care how he gets there, but it is important to him that he hears what she has to say because he recognizes her worth. Not that he doesn't have worth, but he recognizes his privilege and he recognizes his worth, and he is speaking up for and on her behalf.
He doesn't have to be an emperor. He doesn't want to be an emperor. He understands he has 11 people in his council. So like he was okay. Like you said, he wasn't ego-based. He's like, yes, Tarisai, say what you have to say. You know?
Yeah.
Like I have you, I know you are the right person to say what you have to say in this moment. Say what you have to say. Because he was focused on the end result. And as a parent, what is the goal of having a child? Other than the condom. But the goal of having a child. When you have a child, the goal is to raise independent children. It's to raise independent adults.
You know, I think the thing that we're completely forgetting here is that is not what the goal of many parents really is. A lot of parents, and I mean,
children are vanity projects.
Yeah. And for a lot of parents, the children are really just vanity projects. They're just like, oh, well, I remember when I was still in secondary school, this girl, she was like, well, I don't want children, but I will have them one day because that's what she's supposed to do. And I was just like, are you sure you should be doing that? She's like, yeah, well, you know, by then I would have, and she like had this plan that involved like a rich spouse, and I was like, okay. It was not a pretty. It's not.
I have so many feelings about Tarisai and the mother's relationship because, like, those are like some big feels, being just like a reflection and a like
made of me,
a way for your mother to like relive the dreams that she passed up to have you. Like, I felt that, and I was like,
she didn't realize. She didn't realize that Tarisai is her own person, which you have to recognize.
And I feel a lot of moms do that, though. They're like, I have a daughter. That's like me number 2.
Fathers, too, look, they have a son who they want to be the football player. They have this image in their head. But then the son wants to take ballet. And instead of encouraging their child to be independent, like you said, Kier, independent and be their own person and giving them the space to explore those things as they should, they instead push them into sports that they hate or push them into situations that they're not going to excel at. And that I could see that happening with the lady in Tarisai. It's, you're going to do this. You're going to get me my vengeance because I can't get my vengeance. You're going to do it. But Tarisai found another way. and she shouldn't have had to fight so hard for that. Obviously, we wouldn't have a story otherwise, but
Sure.
she was up against a lot in a world that maybe should have made it a little easier.
But the thing is, I really enjoy the fact that she did have to deal with that struggle, though, because I think, I think that I was very fortunate in that my mom was perhaps not as overbearing as many other parents, but that didn't mean she wasn't overbearing. Like, Mom, you're probably watching this. I love you, but like, shit, you had your moments, right? But I do know I did have a lot of friends whose parents were worse. They were definitely, it was definitely a much harder situation for them to deal with their parents. And I think that there were so many signs of how the lady had stripped Tarisai of her identity, just in the little things like the Made of Me song, and how you are me and you are mine, and just kind of trying to reinforce. It was a very literal way of reinforcing the idea that you did not belong to yourself. You belong to me, your parent.
She
didn't even
never
call
called
her by
her.
name.
Yeah.
She never. I was
Not
just saying
until
that.
the
She
end.
never,
Not until the
Till
end.
the very end, yeah.
I cried.
because
Yeah,
she was
at the end.
dead. Of course, she was going to say it. I mean, spoiler. But it brought everything full circle.
Yeah.
But what really hit hard, and I felt for Tarisai in this moment, was when she found out that her mother was always there. And it didn't matter that the lady wanted to be her mother. She's like, I loved you. I watched you. I was there. But it was more important for her not to accidentally make a wish than it was for her to be a presence daily in her daughter's life.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
hit, because I'm like, yes, you loved your daughter.
Ultimately, she's putting her revenge before everything else, and that
Exactly.
That to me
I
was,
love
like, the
I love
tragedy.
my daughter, but I want not to F this up more than I want to make sure she is, and
I mean,
and
that's the whole reason why she created Tarisai. So
So here's
She had
another
a goal and a plan. Like, I respected that about her.
Yeah. But there's like a
True.
whole other, to me,
But it's a
there's
living
whole other
person.
layer of that, right?
Goal
This-
plan.
But I mean, there are women out there that use children like that too, right? Like, they'll
I
Oh,
have seen
no.
people do it.
trap men into marriages or whatever. Yeah.
Fathers and parents. Sorry. My
I
bad.
was about to say that pageant moms, 100%,
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus
or
Christ.
even
another
pop
breed.
stars. Look at Britney Spears' parents.
It's kind of funny though, because like
Look at Lindsay Lohan.
listening to this, and kind of the first thing that happened, like after I finished the book, right before we started this, is it kind of took me all back to like chapter 4. There's like a sentence in there, and I wrote it down. This is the only reason why I know, is that there's a line in the book that she says, maybe all love is like counsel sickness. And that kind of hit me hard, like when I first read it, and then like I came back to it immediately after I finished the book, because I was like, yeah, I mean, all the relations that we have, I mean, like whether it's love, like a romantic relationship or familial relationship, like the more distance you gain, one thing, right? But like also like just the intricacies of that relationship can also just make you crazy and mad as well.
Yeah.
So that's like the first thing I kind of went back to, and that's what this conversation's bringing to mind again for me.
And that's kind of what I mean when I'm saying that like there's another layer behind this, right? Because I do think that the purpose was that kind of surface level, like Gabriella said, a goal and a plan, But there's also the idea that I can only achieve this goal if my daughter carries out my wish. As far as the lady knew, that was it. But part of the goal was my daughter will have her place. My daughter and my children will not have to suffer the erasure that I have suffered, the erasure that all the women before me have suffered, right? Oh, Brie, I'm not hearing.
Sorry, I was on mute. I said morally ambiguous.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
So that definitely added to that character. And it's one of those things where you rail against the fact that, God, you were right there the whole time. You put your vengeance over your child. How could you? And you think that whether you're from, I guess, the perspective of the parent or the child, there's a pain there. And then the further back you step, it's kind of like, yeah, but you're also doing what you think is in the best interest of the child. Your vengeance wasn't just for you. Your vengeance is for every woman that's going to be born as a Raybearer after this moment. Your vengeance is not just, oh, they did me wrong. No, your vengeance is they've done every single woman who had a Ray wrong. Since the first Ray.
Again, there's this Facebook tag group called "The Misogyny is Coming from Inside the House," right? And
I'm afraid that sounds like a horror book.
I'm obsessed with that title.
that, I think the name of it says it all. And the same way that these Raybearers throughout history had their agency and had their purpose stripped from them, right? You want for your child what you never had, and what you never had was a choice. So guess what you did? You took away a certain choice from her, right? Yeah. So I'd never said, well, I want to be a painter. I don't want to be a Raybearer. I don't want to go to the council. I want to play with my friends. I want to have some mangoes. I want to have hugs. Spanking sounds good, though. It is. But the point, like what I saw was that you wanted something, and it's a very great and noble goal. You want other people to have a choice, to have a voice, and to have agency. And the ideal way for you to do it was to take away someone else's own.
So the question is the loss of one agency worth the gaining of all those?
All those, yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, if and I'm thinking, well, like, I get where you're coming from, but
you don't have to agree with it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, like, okay, if that was me, if I was Tarisai, would I choose that path? Would I make the conscious decision to choose that path? And because of the way she was raised, there was a lot that she was rebelling against. She wanted to go and play with the children. She wanted the servants. She wanted her mother to hug her. Right? This was a woman that took agency from her father. And it's like that moral ambiguity is like, look, yeah, it worked.
But it's also a matter of training, right? She didn't know any other way. Her whole life, all that was done to her was the removing of her choices, the removing of her independence, the removing of her options. Her autonomy was destroyed from like the day she was born. Like, was it Bree? You mentioned she was a pet. She was a pet, right? She wasn't a pet. Not even a sister. Not even a sister. She was a pet. No, well, I meant the lady.
Oh, okay, sorry.
The lady was a pet. So the lady had no other way. She didn't know anything except how to take other people's choices away, because that's all she'd known, right?
It's the cycle. It's the cycle of abuse. It's like if a parent is abused, they tend to be abusive. The kid will be abusive, and at some point, somebody has to get woke or get therapy, and choose a different path.
Yeah, and break it.
I love that theme of the generational trauma and like the kids actually stepping up and healing from it. Like I was like, oh, I'm so glad someone's gonna stop this.
Like, if I read this book 15 years ago, I would have saved myself so much money.
It's an investment in your life. It's okay.
No,
like, like everything. Let us. No. But I saw it as, listen, something had to break, and she couldn't break. She could not. She was not in a position to do the breaking of herself, because I think she would have. I can't see somebody say, okay, I want this one night stand because I need a champ. May I kindly have some of your semen, please? Like that's not technology that was available to them. She's like, look, this shit has to stop, right? I'm not a psychopath, but all I have is a hammer. And therefore, I'm going to solve these problems like nails. All I got is agency, and the only thing I can do is strip people of it and then place them like pawns and play chess. Well, again, she's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers.
Yeah.
Right? And thing is, her pieces, her pawns, her knights, her bishops, they're real people. They're people that died for her. They're people that got disowned for her, right? In a society where family was so important to all of them. She took from people. And the thing is, these people, a lot of them gave themselves willingly because they're like, look, I'm going to plant this tree and I'm not going to see fruit from it, but my grandchildren will. My great-grandchildren will be picking fruit from that tree as well. And they saw that. And like we could talk about this book because we haven't even touched on some of the stuff that I saw in it either.
Here's the thing though, right? The thing that, so I could be on the fence. I could be on the fence about the lady. Yeah. Do I love her? Do I hate her? Yeah. But the thing that makes me lean to one side versus on the other is less about all of those other things and more the Songland betrayal.
Absolutely. That I agree. When I got to that at the end part, and you find out that she lied to Owen. I don't know. Owen. She lied to him, and that she wasn't even going to take care of Songland. But then Tarisai stepped up, and I think at the end she used her agency to make the ultimate sacrifice. So, goosebumps.
I don't know, man. I just thought, like, for me, a lot of the decisions that she's made, or that she being the lady, right, the antagonist, a lot of the decisions that were made,
vengeance.
Yeah. But like, I think all of the decisions that she made until that point, I can understand those things in like a very visceral way, because like the goal and the plan, right? Vengeance, not just for myself, but for the generations before me. You know, I can understand all of those things, but
I think Songland was at any cost. It was for her. It was a cost. It was like, I don't care. It's what's the word?
At that point, collateral damage.
Collateral damage.
Yeah. Yeah. But at that point, it's one thing to say, that is the fruit of my labor, the blood of my blood, that I have the power and the control to make all the decisions for. I'm just going to tell her this is what she got to do because I'm her mama. Fine.
Right.
There's a whole different set of rules there where she's just like, oh, well, this entire nation can just keep dying because I want power.
Well, now it's genocide.
And I think
at
that's
that point.
The cost of empire, though. That's the point of it. That, like, the cost of empire is that someone has to bite the bullet on being the bottom rung. And she wasn't willing to spread that burden.
Yeah.
Because she's part of the old generation who hasn't grown enough to make that decision.
When I saw that she had betrayed Songland, the first thought, and I kind of know why. And you remember the college scandal with those celebrities,
right?
That it's a bit of a reach, but that stretch. They did for their children beyond what was required. Beyond what the requirements were, right? So they made donations and they hired, people to do certain things for them, to make it look a certain way. And what that meant is that there was another child who was less privileged, right? Who could not get into that college or who couldn't access certain funding because their spot was given to an overprivileged, I'm using that overprivileged child. Right. Okay. Now, as a parent, one of my children has special needs, and I was trying to get them into a particular school. However, there was a waiting list, and my husband and I were like, "Well, we have a child that requires education, not just regular education, but he requires special ed. He needs this." And everybody has a waiting list of 100 students. And I'm talking about a little school with 10 children. And I recall asking my husband, what do I have to do to get my child in? And I'm asking, and because it's my child, I will do whatever. I'll kill for them, I'll die for them, either way, what bliss.
I'll bribe for them.
And it's like, if I do this thing that one place wanted, I am depriving a child who's been waiting longer than my child has been alive for a spot, for resources. Do I balance my duty as a parent versus my ethics? Right? It turned out that I didn't have to make that choice. So as much as I'm looking at the lady from idealistic perspective, but as a parent, what am I willing to do? I will do what I have to because my job is to my child. My job is not, my job as a mother is not to your child, it's to my child, but as a member of the community, my job is to the children. And what I want for my kid, I must want for yours as well. I must want fair play. And that was something that racked me with guilt for a couple of years because, and I can see, I'm seeing her as listen, do I save the Songland people or do I sacrifice, or do I save my daughter?
I think that, so Bree has had burning things to say about this. I'm gonna let you know what, it's not fair for me to jab myself in the middle of that. You go first, Bree.
Really quick, just kind of discussing what, going along your vein, the haves and the have-nots. Did you guys see Us? The movie? Okay, so going along the theme of have and have not, did anybody else have a moment where when they come in and at the very end and they're like, no more, or Dio, no more kids from Songland, but now it's going to be everybody else instead to make it fair. And everybody's like, no. Nobody else wanted to take that burden, even though it was fair. And I had a moment and it reminded me of Us. And it's the people living underground. And it's it was a moment for me. And, but then of course, Tarisai comes in and fixes it and she makes the ultimate sacrifice. But everybody had a moment where yes, it's fair. You got away with it for hundreds of years, but now you're no.
And here's the thing. Does that remind you of the systems we live in today? Because I didn't see Us. I was just fuck, that's the world I'm in now. I wanted fantasy. That's, but it's real. It's real.
That's
it's
what the best fantasy is.
It is. I know, it's not. It's so sad.
So can I just say,
the fantasy is that one single human being fixes it, right? That's the fantasy.
Otherwise, you have that fight of it's always been Songland, so let's keep it Songland. But it's
that's not fair.
Right? Yeah. And I made a comparison to Kay in one of my 300,000 messages to her. This was an All Lives Matter.
Yes. Hold on. I have the actual thing that you said about the Unity Edict, right?
Yeah.
Which pissed me off. It made all of my skin crawl in the most nasty way. It was just
really quick about that. There was that beautiful, they were talking about it was their Valentine's Day sort of ceremony.
Yes, and they
described how different each one did it. And some were very romantic, some were more modest, some were more and they were so beautiful. And it reminded me of America and all of our cultures that we have here. And then they say with the unity, one language, one dress, one type of name. And that made me mad because I was we just had this beautiful comparison of how we celebrate a holiday. And now you want to make it all the same because everybody kind of had a fighting incident at the, the temple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing that Talia sent me, she said, this Unity Edict seems like All Lives Matter style silencing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uniformity does not equate unity. I don't know when people will get that because we all look and dress the same is not going to foster us to become unified. There needs to be the space to develop a certain kind of respect and adoration for each individual, for their specialities, for their nuances, and celebrate those things. All of those things deserve to be platformed, to be celebrated, to be seen and heard and valued. oh my God, that moment when he said what he said, and then I was like, okay, cool. Well, we'll have like a few years before he tries to impose the unity edict, and then while they're journeying, you start to see people being stripped of their culture, being stripped of their traditions, being stripped of their histories, and I was just broken. What?
Yeah.
And the fact that a family was literally being broken up because of the monetary benefits of falling in line, right?
Yeah,
Crazy.
That hit me hard, right? Because that's something that, again, like it's something like Native American people have been dealing with for centuries in the United States, and it's something that it's a very real thing that I feel like I have to deal with every day. Where like I don't live on my reservation anymore. I don't, and I feel like every single day that I stay off of my reservation, that I don't speak my native language or participate in a traditional ceremony, I feel like I'm getting stripped of that identity in favor of trying to pursue, a career and, a stable lifestyle. And it's something that, I think a lot of other people from other cultures can identify with, but I think it's something that it hit me hard with this book, having that unity edict, and then having to talk about people from Songland getting sacrificed, because I drew a direct line between my culture and just the sacrifices that we have been making so that a country like the United States can exist. That is harsh for me.
And I think that that's such a perfect parallel. It's such a perfect parallel for Indigenous peoples and for every single, for enslaved peoples, certainly, who were stripped of all of their cultures and their heritage. For people like for Kirsten and I, who are descended from endangered people, many of whom were coerced and kidnapped, right? And who didn't have any plans to live on an island in the Caribbean, so far from home. Right?
For example, how many indigenous last names do we have in Trinidad and Tobago?
I'm indigenous. Like, I have indigenous roots, and I don't know anything about them. I don't know what tribal relations they are. I don't know what language they spoke. I don't know anything about my indigenous.
Every pure Arawak I know have a last name like Rodriguez.
Right, but that happened across all enslaved peoples, and I think that it was like. Because I agree, like Seidel, that rant was like spoke straight to my heart. It spoke straight to my heart and it's something Kirsten and I actually talk a lot about, is that desire, that kind of pining feeling to reconnect with the ancestry that you've lost, that you don't know anything about anymore. And that when I can't speak for Kirsten, but I know certainly when I was younger, I let go and I actively pushed away a lot of the Indianness of my family, right? A lot of the practices of the Hindu religion that my mother's family had. I wasn't really close to my father's family growing up, and they were separated, but I pushed a lot of that away because I grew up in a place, in an area where it was mostly did we lose Shayna? Or did she just take her cat? Oh, there you are. What was I saying? I was in the middle of my own kind of rant. Right. Well, I did that purposefully because you're rewarded. You're rewarded by assimilation rewards you, right?
You have that internalized colonization, that internalized despise for things that are of your culture. And it takes a very long time to unlearn it, to realize the value in your history and your ancestry and your family line.
And it takes a long time, I think, to get there, because privilege gives you perspective, right? Now that I am in a position where if I wanted to engage more deeply in like things that have to do with the Hindu religion or with like Indian culture, if I wanted to travel, I can afford to do that now. I'm in a position where I can stand on my own 2 feet of my skills, with my profession. And it doesn't matter, like I've taken meetings in my pajamas, right? If I take a meeting in a sari, you might be like, well, that's looking nice, but that's about as far as that's going to go. Yeah, but I had to achieve a certain amount of privilege before I could look back on all the things that I stepped on to get here and say I want that back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then even for me, I moved away from Trinidad when I was what, 8? I think I was 7 or 8 years old. And my mom didn't. She wanted to keep the culture and bring it over with us, but she couldn't because a really good example that I only just found out about recently is that when we moved here, and we would celebrate Diwali and light diyas outside, the neighbors came over and asked, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" So she was ashamed, and then we never did it again, right? Which is very different from being back home when we have it's a whole night of celebration, which we just never did again. And I've only now recently, I'm almost 30 now, come back to that and pushing my mom, well, let's celebrate. I'm going to come over. My husband and I are going to come over. Let's celebrate. And even now, she's still a little hesitant. She puts maybe 2 diyas outside. She doesn't really talk about it because she was so ingrained trying to fit in when we moved to just, you don't do that. That's not what you do here. You fit in here.
Yeah.
So a little from the Latina side or Latinx side, one of the biggest hangups I have is I'm kind of in the middle. Sometimes I don't feel Puerto Rican enough. Sometimes I don't feel white enough, because I fall kind of in the middle. On top of that, my Spanish is very bad. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, I grew up in the middle of Florida. All my friends spoke English. There was no need necessarily to speak Spanish except to grandma. But also, and I'll check the historical, but from how I understand it is Puerto Ricans came first to like New York City. And when you come first, you assimilate. And so a lot of Puerto Ricans speak English. The joke in New York City is Puerto Ricans think they're hot shit until you speak to them in Spanish, because a lot of them don't speak Spanish. But then we have the huge Dominican population here in New York. Dominicans came after. So they could hold on to their culture, their language. So they're very proud of their language. I had a Dominican ex-boyfriend, very proud. Whereas I'm very white, and my Spanish, I hang on to my culture, but my Spanish is weak, So it's hard, like you described. Your mom was assimilating, but you want to embrace that culture. It's funny because I'm trying to embrace it and learn it now in adulthood. So,
yeah,
it's definitely something. I mean, in my experience of Trinidad, anyways, I've only been in New York for 3 years, but comparing the two in terms of how cultures are at least recognized in Trinidad versus how they're recognized here, I have such a greater appreciation for that back home, because even though we have our class wars and to some degree our race wars in Trinidad, there is still this, everybody celebrating Diwali, everybody celebrating Pagua, everybody celebrating Christmas, everybody celebrating everything, because our culture is so multifaceted. It is part of who we are as a people, versus here, it's just like,
It's like
We're all
like
white Anglo-Saxon Christians.
yes,
And if you're not, you better hide it.
yes, yeah, exactly. Don't be anything other than that.
Yeah,
I
and then
think that
to sorry.
No, you go first.
Just to what Brendan said in the comments about
I just wanted to highlight that. So,
yes,
and
and I
he
know.
says, let me just read it out quick.
Yeah,
I had an experience with a young man who feels like he couldn't call himself Latin because he couldn't speak Spanish, and struggled to identify himself for a bit, and felt often like he was fake when he claimed that part of his identity.
I feel that.
I feel that really hard too. And I know I've sent you, Kara, I've sent you so many messages about imposter syndrome that I just feel like I've been away from it for so long, and it's been taken away from me for so long, that now that I'm trying to come back to it, I almost feel like, do I even have that right? Should I even be doing this? Because I feel like it's fake at this point.
Yeah.
So
I feel that a lot around my Filipino-ness, because my grandmother, when they came, she was a college professor in nursing, and her accent was ruthlessly mocked. So she didn't teach. She refused to let any of the children speak Tagalog in the house. She didn't want them to have accents. My mother barely understands Tagalog now. I have none. Wow. And it was so hard to get to a point in my life where I could write Filipino stories, because without that language connection to, even when my grandmother was still alive, it was just so hard. And it's like dementia hit her and she was only speaking Tagalog. Like suddenly there was that language barrier. And because of the decision she'd made to help our family, make it.
Yeah.
And it's institutionalized as well. We, like my family, we speak English, right? We speak English in Trinidad. We speak English, and I'm reiterating this because a couple of years ago, my sister, her son, and her daughter, they migrated to the U.S. And do you know that my nephew, who is rude, who has been rude in English since he was the age of 2, is in an ESL class?
I feel like
Hey, just to kind of like touch on that, I was born in the United States. I was actually not even born on my reservation. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, right? And just because my parents put down that I spoke both Navajo and English growing up, I had to be tested in ASL every year in public school.
Jesus Christ.
12 years. Like I was like advanced English, like everything, and I was had to be classified. Yeah,
I remember
it was the most frustrating thing. Yeah,
I remember when you told me that English was not your first language, and I was like, "You're what? Excuse me?"
Yeah, it's not.
How? I know a lot of people English is their second language, and nobody what?
But America really punishes it. My mother-in-law, she's Canadian, only speaks a smattering of French. Every single year, she has to do English certification tests to keep her job. And she's like, I've been here for 25 years.
Oh my God.
And she's Ukrainian, white as white can be. So you will just be continually punished in the U.S. for any kind of unorthodoxy.
Wow. Oh, yeah, I remember this. So Brendan says to do a US-based program in 2019, I had to do an English test to prove that I can speak the language, even though the program identifies my country as speaking native English. Yeah.
But my sister had a meeting with this school, and they wanted to get an interpreter. She said, but we speak English. No, we see here on Wikipedia that you all speak patois. And like my sister is telling you, I speak English.
In English. It's crazy. And moving here and realizing, like speaking with an accent, and people realizing, oh, she sounds different, and having that barrier of it's crazy how we don't teach people to listen. We don't teach people to actively engage in a conversation. So like as soon as you hear an accent, you're automatically, oh, that's clearly not English. I can't already understand you. When it's like, I'm speaking English. The words are the same. We are saying the same things.
I wanna jump into
Why
this.
is no one listening?
I want to jump into this because I feel like for me, again, there are like 2 or 3 layers here that like really hit me hard. When I first, because I was schooled in the US, right? I was one of those kids who I was like, well, all the things I want to do aren't in Trinidad, so I better bust my ass and find a scholarship because I can't do it here. And that's how I managed to meet Bri and Shayna, right? Because they also went to school with me. So I managed to get that, and I went to school in the US, and I remember speaking to my roommates. One was from Colombia, but she had gone to an international American school, and she had done so for a number of years. And the other 2 were, to use one of their own phrases, they were white bread American. So I think one was from Georgia and the other was from Minnesota, right? And I'm speaking to them, and I turn around to speak to a friend from Trinidad, somebody who I had known from around, but he happens to go to the same school. So he sees me in wherever we are, and he's like, "Hey, Care," and we talk for a little bit. Obviously, though, you code switch. So I speak to him like I speak at home, and then I turn around and I speak to my my new roommates, most of whom are American, and when I turned back to my friends, my roommate friends, who I guess they became my friends, but my roommates, they were like, "What language was that?" And I go, "What?" They're like, "What were you just speaking? What was that?" And I'm like,
English.
what? It didn't sound like English. It was definitely English. English is my native language. At one point when I was a grad student, someone asked me for help with something. And I was like, I don't have a lot of expertise on that, but I could connect you with my mom. She has a lot of experience with it. And they were like, oh, what language does she speak? And I was like, what? She speaks English. You've met my mom.
Yeah.
It's been crazy. But even that for me, that discussion around language and what it means to be and feel connected is a sore spot for me, because I am very commonly told that I don't sound Trinidadian. Very, very commonly. And it's because, yes, exactly. And it's because I spent so long training myself to sound a certain way so that people could understand me for work, for job, because it was that assimilation that got me the privilege, right? Like I had to, now as a writer, I have the privilege to write patois, to write Creole into my work, which is great. And I love it. And I try to do it as best I can. But I know that I have my own internal default that is not that. And it's not because here at home, that's not how I speak or how I want to speak. It's because whenever I'm talking to an audience, I automatically make that an audience that needs to hear me speak a certain way. Because even though we speak like that, we'll speak patois, Creole here in Trinidad, we also understand what Americans say on TV, right? But it doesn't work the other way around. I was
just going to say, because they're not trained to listen to things that are other. Yes. America is very focused on the white male most times story. And that story usually sounds like an American accent. And so there's no confrontation. They're never having their boundaries tested. They're never having to step out of anything other than the narrative that they're accustomed to encountering. And that's not just white Americans. That's anybody who lives in America, because that's what America is teaching its population. That's how it's mandating. That's how it's indoctrinating its people. It's so opposed to other in an attempt to be so rooted in self. And it's great to be rooted in self, but that does not mean that you actively have to oppose other. But that's what America is. It is an opposition to anything that is different.
Even then, though, it's all like one facet of America, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, when I say America,
taking away like all of the cultures and stuff but there are different kinds of English you can speak across America.
Yes.
And they only focus on like New York or LA.
Yeah. When I say America, I mean like that one sect. It's
like that one like Manhattan Island sect. That's it. Or Los Angeles.
So I give you my favorite negative critique of a television series.
Mm-hmm.
So this television series takes place in England with English people with British accents. What language does England speak?
English.
Americans are like, oh my God, I don't like this. I can't understand what they are saying. And
we remake British shows with American actors.
England.
Yeah. I was
we do. Supposedly speak. That is where it comes from. What?
I want to draw a couple of lines.
For an American to spend like any moment just like parsing something different, and it's wild to me. But I know people who that's the world they live in.
I remember looking for one particular show, and I had to it came up, the American one came up and the British one, and I was like, there is an American version of the exact same show. Sorry, Brigo.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say that, unfortunately, human nature is familiarity feels safe. We gravitate towards familiarity. Whereas different shouldn't be approached with the opposite, which is fear. It should be approached with curiosity. Exactly. But it isn't always. And that's the unfortunate thing. So, yeah, maybe British shows have different slang. They use different words. Like, what is it? A trunk is a boot. Take a minute to learn some of the different colloquialisms. It's not so difficult and it's interesting.
But we have really good reason to feel and to believe and to act like other is dangerous, and not that other is, you should approach other with curiosity, right? Like historically, the empire is the reason that we approach things that way. Yeah. Gabriella, I hope you don't. Do you mind if I like make a parallel to that conversation we had the other day about the why would we treat this ship differently?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Gabriella and I are both writers, and I had read some of her work, and we were trying to somebody else. We were talking about how to explain to somebody else why colonizers were not fought as soon as they arrived. And it's because when the ship that brings the colonizers arrive, you talk to them, you engage with them, and you have no reason to believe that they're different to every other ship that has come in the past who has only sought to trade with you, right? And so you welcome them as you would anybody else, and then the next day there are 6 warships and they're like, you're mine now, right? And that trains you to think and see things differently. And I think that when you are the people on that warship, it's like, I don't know if this is a global thing or if it's like a West Indian thing, but you know how we talk about how like fathers don't want their little girls engaging with boys because they know what boys are like because they're that kind of guy. Is that yeah? And it's the same thing, right? So the colonizers, they're like, I know what I'm like. So I'm going to assume everybody coming at me is exactly the same and treat you negatively, treat you badly. Yeah. There was something that I wanted to, there were some dots I wanted to connect from like a writing perspective that I think Gabriella started when you were talking about how long it took you to feel comfortable in writing Filipino stories, right? And that is something that I also really struggle with because as far as I know, I am not descended from anybody that was originally born or raised on the African continent, right? I have some indigenous blood. I certainly have some colonizer blood, and I've got lots and lots of people from South Asia, right? A lot of blood from there, but not from the African continent. But the language that I grew up with, my language, is a blend. It's Creole. It's Creole or Patois. It's right. It's and a lot of the words that we use in Trinidad and in Trinidadian language and what we say and how we speak, it's from they have Afro roots. They have African roots, right? And I struggle a lot with not only I can't write the kinds of stories that, for lack of a better term, or perhaps this may be the term, that Desi writers write. I can't write the stories that Desi writers write. I can't identify with that for so many reasons, right? Like I read Star Daughter and I read Arusha and I read all of those books, and they have, all of this like deep culture from South Asia, from like India specifically. For a lot of them, it's India specifically, but for some, there are other countries that have similar cultures, right? And so like this Desi girl thing, I can't connect to that because I never grew up with that. And in the time when I may have had the opportunity to connect with it, I was trying to assimilate something else and I rejected it. Yeah. And even that culture, even that connection, I think would not have been nearly as strong as what some of these writers have experienced, right? My lived experience had been really different. And now I try to write something based on my culture and my lived experience and what I live and know and have felt. And it ain't Indian, y'all. Not entirely, right? Do I have the right to do this? As a Trinidadian, I think I do, because this is my culture. My culture isn't Desi culture. My culture is Trini culture.
Right.
But I know that somebody in America is not going to look at it the same way. Do I care? Not really.
But that's not their decision to make. That's the same thing. So I had this, this is vaguely related, but kind of. I've always wanted to be married in a sari. Like, I just think they're gorgeous.
I support that decision.
They're absolutely beautiful.
I support that decision, provided you help. I help you shop for it.
Okay, cool. Provided I get married. Because this was like years ago.
To be fair, like you could just like buy a set. You don't need to get married.
I need someone.
You're right. You're right.
Post-pandemic, boys are going to be desperate, okay?
Summer of love, guys. Summer of love.
Okay, so let's rewind. Okay. Saidal always wants to get mine. Sorry.
But
Let's go from there.
a couple years ago, more than a couple years ago, there was this thing about one of these girls that I follow, an influencer who got married in a sari. She has Caribbean parents. She's Canadian and she has Caribbean parents. And the internet like blew up on her because like this is cultural appropriation. And I remember when cultural appropriation was such a buzzword in mainstream. I'm like, if you decide to tell stories that are true to you about the place that you live in because they are your lived experience, then who in their right mind can actively say that this is any sort of wrong, appropriation, incorrect, misrepresentation? Because that's bullshit. Like, you're not speaking about anyone else.
Will tell you that.
But white Twitter will try to make you believe that your experiences are invalid and you can't speak to them. Fuck white Twitter. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse. It's fine.
You can. I've been kissing in this whole stream. You're good.
I'm just validating your desire to write stories that feel true to you and your experiences because they are true.
Yeah.
Trinidad is not
live.
Trinidad is not black,
American
Trinidad is not Indian. We are multicultural. To my point earlier about how we celebrate all stories.
So now, one hot topic when it comes up a lot with cultural appropriation is corn. When in the US it's cornrows, in Trinidad it's cane row. Let's say I'm like 14, we are both 14, 15, and I'm hanging out at your house.
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thing you go and pull me to do? Come now, let me plait your hair.
Plait your hair. Mm-hmm.
And listen, I remember in Form 6, I was going to school looking like Alicia Keys, man. Okay? And I can guarantee you that I had a lineup of friends who would sit down and plait my hair, right? Now, unlike friends, I don't sit down in a multicultural country and be like, hi, Sida, would you like to be my token black friend? Right? Hey, would you like to be my token Indian friend? Because I'm like 1/3 colonizer, so I think I'll be the white girl in the group for now because I'm very ditzy. So I will perform that stereotype. I will take that L. Right? We don't do that here.
You like this?
We had this discussion as to why I am like this. But
no, I think that
we don't do that, and because we have a certain appreciation, I will not go to somebody's house, right, and do certain things, right? People will come to my house and they will take their shoes off, and I don't have to tell them to take their shoes off. You think that could happen in another country? I have to explain to them. Listen. My ancestors will pick me up tonight. I don't care.
Hold on, I didn't hear what Gabriella said.
The shoes thing is a fight I have every time I have guests, even if it's the guest's 10th time in my house. And I'm like, this is my house. I paid for this roof and you will not wear shoes under it.
Well, I just say my mother would be rolling. When people come to my house, like the superintendent or any like a plumber or anything, I bought shoe covers for them because I'm like, if my mother knew you were walking in my house without shoes, she'd be over here with the chancla. You just don't do it. Like, it's so ingrained that you just don't do it.
Right. I try not to, like, if a work person comes to my home and they're in their steel-tip boots, I'll deal with the ancestors because that's that's safety. And I need to care about these people too. They need to be safe in my house.
I like the shoe covers. That's a good idea. I didn't think about the shoe covers.
But yeah, shoe covers.
Shoe covers, or just feeling empowered enough, and it takes practice to tell somebody, like, this is my house, these are my rules. You don't have to do it in your house, but if you're coming into my house, respect that.
Yeah, I have house slippers, but because I have cats, there's always like something on the floor. A toy, a piece of food that they like wiped off their face, I don't know, 10 feet away from the bowl. Like, it's not as bad now because they're on wet food only, but when it used to be that they were on dry food, there would be like pieces of dry food, just like, because they'd take like a single grain and just like play with it across the floor, like, and yeah. So I used to do that. I used to be like, look, you can't take your shoes off, but you don't have to because cats, and I understand. But I have like slippers that I wear only in my house, and I had to like, My
But
poor
when I come
husband.
by you, I take my shoes off. My children take their one will take his shoes off. Right.
Yeah,
And
and
he
the other child will stand up on my couch in his shoes. I remember. Yes, I know.
that's the colonize.
That's the, why
That's
you
the
like
colonize.
this. Yeah.
I'm
But
a terrible
I want to bring all of this back to Raybearer.
Yeah.
I
because
think that
that's
this was honestly a fantastic tangent, though. I think that we all really enjoyed that tangent. I don't know if I'm wrong about that. I certainly enjoyed that tangent. But I want to bring it all back to.
colonize a trauma, you know?
Oh yeah, that's good. That's fine. There's nothing bad about that.
You get a bunch of brown people together. Eventually, you're going to talk about colonizers. So
It's true. It's true. Like I knew what I was getting into when I was like, only women have color. Like I knew that. I knew what I was getting into when I made that decision. But to bring it back to Raybearer, specifically that unity edict, because that is what started this whole conversation. I don't know if Seidel has more insight to this and to around that, like the cultural storytelling and the drum speak and things like that, because like I know of it as a result of living in Trinidad, but I don't know. Oh, okay. Yes, Talia. Yes, your hand is.
It was just do you know or remember when you were little and you're singing a song on television, you know, you're singing the little soca's that come or the R&B or whatever, something is on TV or it's on the radio and you are singing along and your parent or your grandparent says to you, do you know your schoolwork as well as you know that song?
How many times did Grandma tell us that, Care?
Listen.
How many times?
I'm not counting.
Who amongst us
I
that does
promise
not
you, if we were singing Kuch Kuch Kota here, she would have never said that. She would have never said that if it's one of them Bollywood songs.
She's entitled to her bias. It's called keeping the culture alive. But when they're talking about the griots, am I pronouncing it? The griots, right? When they're talking about the griot, and they refer to them as being the teachers and the keepers of history. And that is why I can remember these songs better, because they have a hook, they rhyme, they make sense. There's an actual methodology to remembering all of this instead of a 3-inch thick biology textbook, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, my teachers don't teach in iambic pentameter.
That's it's true, they don't. That's a really valid point. And I think this might be, I don't know if Seidel might have more or better to say about it, but I think that's literally the purpose of the griot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oral storytelling, that oral tradition of keeping history and telling stories, it is as structured and has just as many very specific methods to use to create stories that people remember, that people can retell. Mm-hmm. As the written word in the West now. In fact, more so, right? Even something like, I think it's the Odyssey. I was recently reading, I finally got a copy of Dr. Wilson's translation, which I've been very excited to read. That's the one, I think it's the first translation by a woman. And so there are a lot of sort of male gaze biases that are happening in all of the other translations that she was just kind of like, fuck that. So I'm really excited to like finally dig into it, and I've only read a couple pages so far. But one of the things that she mentions in her introduction is that there's so much evidence around the Odyssey being actually not being a written story, but being an oral story that had been told and retold many a time, simply by the way they repeat certain words or how certain phrases are structured and how they've changed over the versions of the story over time. And it's unfortunate that I don't know any specific stories from actual griots that I could use as that example. I don't know if you know any, Seidel.
I mean, the stories that come to mind that I think would be popular for people is the idea of an Nancy, because that's what a Nancy is.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah,
is those folk stories that are are always passed down by an elder, a grandmother or a grandfather in a village to the children, and you run around remembering and singing about these characters. And there's these studies about how music affects the brain and how music is used for all types of different therapy and healing and memory.
Memory development and
exactly. And so it makes sense that in teaching, in translating and transferring information, we use music, we use rhythm, we use story. It's brilliant. I wish it wasn't looked at as primitive or
it's so much more advanced than written.
Exactly.
It's so much more advanced than written storytelling. Like the skill level that you need to have as a storyteller to craft an oral story like that is insane. It's insane.
Well, story is ingrained in our biology, and it's really fascinating with neuroscience because, like you were saying in school, your schoolwork, if you're memorizing dates and random facts, and that's a whole bunch of information compartmentalized separately, and you can't really link one to the other. So it's difficult to learn that way, but that's how we kind of teach things. But we're wired for story, and we basically, if you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, you're basically stacking and compressing that information so you can access more with less power. And so that's why, like, oral histories and stories, we've been telling stories since the very beginning, and we tell them now because story is a format that allows us to store the maximum amount of information and to recall the maximum amount of information.
Because there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And Miguel and I were reminiscing.
They're all connected.
Yeah.
It's the information's connected instead of just a date here and a date there.
It's not just connected in that sense, but it's also connected in the way that we are receiving it, because you are now tapping into your emotional responses to a story. You are truly and fully now learning a thing, not just with your brain, but with your senses. And that sensory memory is so much more valuable and so much more long lasting than just regular memory. I don't know what the alternative term
than like cram memory is what I call it.
The what memory? Okay.
I call it cram memory. That's not the scientific term. I don't know what it is. I say cram the memory because it's the stuff that like you just like memorize like when you're cramming.
It feels accurate. Yeah, I
don't think that's the real
definition as you said it. It was accurate.
We'll just coin the phrase now. Cram memory.
Sure, cram memory. Sure.
But you can think of your favorite song. How many of us can sing Backstreet Boys or Britney Spears at the drop of a hat and know every single word? Because we had emotional.
The funniest part about that is that I was not even a fan of either of those when I was a kid, but everybody around me sang it. Everybody around me was, and so it doesn't matter that I didn't sit down and like I don't know what did Lee do when she was listening to like Blink 182. Like they played that stuff nonstop, and because I was just there, I learned it. I didn't even try that. Could you imagine the things I did try with like the Linkin Park song that Madam quote earlier? Right?
Yeah. The I really enjoyed the exploration of some of those traditions and how rich and diverse and valuable it is to hold on to those things. So like just even the drum speak, the idea of learning what the drum means and sounds like, and how that communicates thought and ideas was very interesting to read about. Thinking back to things like the Cambule riots and getting back our rights for drums and getting back our rights in that regard, and how now, at least for myself, I feel very distant from that idea of knowing what the drum means, but there's still this through thread or this under thread, this innate call that your body just automatically resonates with. You almost like a spiritual connection. There's something that resonates deeper than you knowing that this is what this means.
You might have to. I don't know if you would mind, or one of the other trainees would mind explaining what the Cambule riots were, because I think most people here don't know.
Okay. Okay, I
But
can take
it
it.
ain't gonna be me.
I don't remember.
You gotta do it. 'Cause I don't. Yeah, I don't remember enough.
I
to, like,
don't
give you
remember
an
the-
accurate description with like the
I
year and
think
everything.
it was very similar. I think that was very similar. That a lot of things that were banned, they were banned because they were black and brown people doing it.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Right.
So the Cambule riots culminated in it was the banning of the drum, the banning of singing and dancing, the banning of sort of any of those
It was
African traditions.
1881.
There we
That's
go.
what yeah.
Any of those African traditions were put a ban on them. So you could no longer carry a boy in the street, you could no longer beat drums, you could no longer sing, you could no longer do a whole lot of stuff. And the people revolted and decided this enough is enough. We are going to fight for our right to celebrate our heritage, celebrate our African history, celebrate where we are from.
Yeah, because I think stick fighting itself, right, was also banned.
Yes.
Yeah. So like, because you mentioned just now that you couldn't like carry the bois.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a bois is a piece of stick as a stick, and that was essentially your weapon. It was your staff, your enforcing of power, your arm, essentially.
Yeah, it was a weapon, and I think in because I was looking into this recently, actually, that in stick fighting here we have calendar, but there's also the martial arts.
Stick fighting is called calendar.
Calendar.
And song is also calendar. So that you chant, that you sing with it.
Yeah, and then we have chant wells for that. That because the chant is a call and response kind of.
It's an intimidation tactic. It's
I learned.
Yeah,
I learned. Yeah. But all of that is like ring psychology. That's the Gaian psychology. You know,
beautiful.
like
I love it.
It's cool. But I realized because I never knew, but there's also a Sikh form of it that's called Gatka. That's also popular. That has kind of been absorbed into Kalinda, but a lot of the Indian laborers who engage in stick fighting, they use Gaka because that's what they knew. And so that's kind of part of, and I thought that was really cool because I was kind of like, it's another thing where I was like, do I have a right to use this as a model for my book?
Right.
I guess I do.
Yeah. So the Cambule riots were people taking back that power, were standing up for their own rights, and it culminated in a weekend of protest and fights that got pretty violent, and then we conquered I can't remember his name right now, but whoever the general was.
I totally just closed the page.
It's fine. Whoever the general was at the time, I don't know why I can't remember because it's part of the chant, but they conquered him and people got their rights back, and that's how we got Carnival. That's how we got the right to parade the 2 days in the street as a celebration of our independence, our liberation.
And we still have Cambule as a stick fighting celebration,
so
like every
year there is it's part of because it is the birth of Carnival, it is part of the Carnival celebration. So Dimashq night, you can go to what is that area? In town. It's like sketch, but like anyways, I can't remember the name of it. But you can go there and see the Cambule riots every night.
Yeah, that's what I was
reenacted.
Honestly, what I'm thinking of is in South. It's not in Port of Spain.
No, there's one in Port of Spain.
I know that there is, but I don't know why.
Belmont? Nope, not Belmont.
No, it's not Belmont. It's not Belmont. It's not Belmont.
It's by the bridge, but in the back. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry that I don't remember geography.
Honestly, like
Google it. Honestly,
it's how all of us.
I hadn't realized that Raybearer's drum was so like closely drawn to Caribbean history. That's fascinating.
I think it's because it's closely drawn to Nigerian history.
Especially that edict, that unity edict, right? That All Lives Matter BS.
Welcome back, Brie.
Sorry, it really pissed me. I was so mad.
I love how there are 3 fucking Trinidadians here, and none of us can like recall where the fuck we go to see the reenactment.
I'm looking it up. It's fine. I'm looking it up.
Like if we
what is wrong with us?
Take a left here and we can go.
Carnival was like my job for 3 years. What is happening?
I'm ashamed.
I wasn't going to say anything, Care.
I'm so ashamed. If my mother is watching this, she's probably so embarrassed with me right now.
Listen,
should have
remember
that
that
stuff on the
grandma
internet.
also taught us that
Somewhere.
you
I have
know,
not-
take a left by the tree, take a right by that
It's
house.
so
You know the one with the tree?
But listen, if
So-
it's 4 o'clock, right? If it's after 4, that man gonna have his cow tie by the road and you take a right there, not a left.
But if it's not 4 o'clock yet, you can't look for the cow because the cow wouldn't be there.
No, well, you go right because you see the other fella not going to park his car.
But
in
you
the
go see the
road.
tree, no, but you're gonna see the tree that the cow is be tied to, and that's how you know go still have a piece of
Yeah,
rope.
but it's 2 trees, one on either side of the road.
Or only one will have rope.
You don't always have rope.
But that's how we give directions here.
It's the
You
same,
go down the
same
road
on
and then
reservation.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Saidal is talking about the bridge, and I'm like, I know what she's talking about, but what's that called?
it's not East Dry River.
I'm so ashamed. I'm so ashamed. But coming back to the drums and what Gabriella mentioned about how closely it ties to Caribbean history, it's because Jordan Ifueko is, I believe she identifies as Nigerian American. I want to say she was born there, but her parents are from Nigeria. So she's the children of immigrants. And she did say, and yes, I absolutely looked up more than one interview in preparation for today. I'm the American daughter. This is from unitedbypop.com. She did an interview for them. I can't remember the year because I wasn't smart enough to include it, but I'm going to guess it was recent. I'm the American daughter of Nigerian immigrants who were raised when Nigeria was a British colony. So there's lots of West African folklore and some European fairy tale elements. I also
Piccadilly
grew up-
Greens. Sorry.
What?
Sorry. Piccadilly Greens.
Piccadilly.
Piccadilly Street.
Yes.
Diverses. Sorry. I saw this. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. No, that's,
Catharsis.
my whole brain is like, yes, that's the name of the place.
Exactly where it is.
Thank goodness. Okay. Good on us. But Piccadilly is technically Belmont. It's like town / Belmont. It's like right where one
Belmont.
becomes the other.
Yeah, on the cusp.
Somebody's been living west of the lighthouse for too long, but I'm not calling names.
You mean yourself? It had to be.
I'm not
So-
living west of the lighthouse.
You don't act like it. Anyway.
I'm just happy I can slightly follow this conversation.
It's true because we would have like walked through town for Carnival. I apologize to all of the Americans
We're enjoying ourselves.
for the way this went. All right.
I'll attempt to behave.
But what I was coming back to though was Gabriella's point about how the drums were so closely tied to us, and a big part of the reason for that is griots, for example, is something that's here too, right? And so many of the almost all, like the enslaved people who were brought here by colonists were West Africans. A great deal of them were West Africans. And so that same kind of... Is that a cat?
Yes, my cat is. He gets fed at 4, and it's now 4. So he's come to remind me.
We can tie up this soon because, like,
I'll mute so you don't just hear him screaming.
it's cool. My cats scream at me all the time. I understand. I'm sure that many of us understand.
Yep.
I understand.
I've got a second dachshund that's now arrived, and he'll be wanting his belly rubs in about 10 minutes.
Gotcha. Well, we can tie up. But yeah, so that's basically why it's so connected to like Caribbean culture, because a lot of Caribbean culture is built on the same culture, or it has the same roots. So there's a lot of foundational realities there. Yeah.
Like particularly the unity crap with the drums. That pissed me off so much.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I feel like it pissed off every single Trini in this group. Particularly. Surely it pissed off the Americans too, but like
how traumatized Sidel, who has been a part of that, would feel. But it's like the Africans or the African descendants, they have their particular drums that do particular things, and then the Indians, they have their tassa, and it's like drumming is such an integral part of all music
Expression and communication.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And as
Like,
somebody who like spent a lot of time telling people I don't like Tassa, you give me some live Tassa and you will not be able to tell me from any other stereotypical Trini Indian. Like it's like the one caveat. You give me live Tassa and I am
Somebody the other day, right? Because I'm mixed. I'm Indian and like a lot of other Trinis. Somebody introduced their uncle and they use an East Indian term and they say, you know what that is, or you're too mixed. I said, excuse me, you questioning my East Indian heritage? Do you know I had Tassa at my wedding? And Miguel was, and as after I walked off, I was like, Miguel is telling me, yeah, but I was pre-recorded. I say, I'm mixed, okay? So like, yes, I had Tassa, it's just like not live, but it was there.
I couldn't. I'm like, I can't do, for some reason. I think that some of it is because I'm tone deaf. I'm fairly certain that I'm tone deaf to a certain degree. And so there are a lot of sounds that just sound like noise to me. But live Tassa, I think part of the reason I love the live Tassa so much is the vibration in the air, because there's a very real, very literal vibration in the air.
Everybody
so many
as well.
So many cultures use drums as a language. And that's something that I kind of want to learn, but I'm also terrified to be like, hey, I want to learn Tassa at 30. How old am I now? Does
Never
anybody
too
know?
old to learn. Never too old to learn. Never too old.
3? Yes, 33. Thank you, Shane.
I started learning salsa and bachata in my 30s too. So
There we go.
Maybe, yeah.
you got to connect however you can, you know?
Yeah, but also like pandemics and people and like, I don't know. But I would really like to do that. Cool. Okay, so then let's do the thing where we all give our last thoughts so that we can go feed our cats and rub tummies. Whether it's our own tummies or others, it's good either way. We'll start. Let's go to the bottom right and then just like work our way up. And I'll go last. So Talia, you want to go first?
Cultural appreciation, not what, you know, like I think the book spoke so much about a lot of the trauma that we as Black and, you know, BIPOC people go through, and that, you know, that hold that we have, and that we need to be careful of the things we hold on to, that we hold on to our culture and not our trauma, so that we can provide a better, more equitable future for our children. Because I want Sidel at my son's wedding, right, etc. Right, I want to show up in whatever. Like, she just needs to pick a color and the style. I am there. Doesn't have to be. And I think that we need. I think this was like, this book felt very Caribbean. It did not feel American, as in an immigrant living in America. This felt like somebody in the Caribbean, be it Grenada, be it Jamaica, Barbados. We are all so similar yet so different. And I felt seen. I felt like they wrote that book for me. Like, this should be required reading for CXC. Okay,
I hope the author sees this, because honestly, this is what every author needs to hear. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I just got very excited.
Right? And there's so many parts of this book that I love, because it's drilled into us as writers, you know, plot driven. You'll be, you know, relegated to literary fiction where there's no money, so plot driven. And this book was very, very character driven. Like I said, you know, you now start telling a story, so you kind of ain't get there yet to the point. It's like, you know, I remember. And then you come and then you kind of work your way around, and then you get to the little backstory, and everything flows. You just don't realize it flows from the beginning, because this is the character growing up and giving us, you know, this is me at 5, you know, this is how I saw things. This is me as a 5-year-old giving my current experience. This is me at 10 giving my current experience. This is me at 15. And the character, I felt like the author wrote kind of like a 5-year-old, or like what they think they were like as a 5-year-old. Then they wrote like how they think they were at 10. And not that it was unreliable narrator, but it was the growth of the storyteller then. Because storytellers are so important in that book. just like storytellers are important to us. We are all storytellers in one way or another. Sidel, I remember you from a comedy group, improv group. That is where I remember you from. Right? You tell stories. You tell stories based on prompts that are given from the audience. Right? You tell stories on the spot. And that's like, that reminded me of like, you know, when they gave the story the night before and she stole it, and it reminded, you know, and we are all, it was so important that the storytellers not tell. And that is what, like, I am going through a very hard time not collecting, but controlling my thought process. Like, it is just so important that we write our own voices as authentically as we can. Because as similar as Karen and I are in terms of racial background, might be different percentages on the, you know, 23andMe report, but we are very, very similar, yet we are so, so, so different. Right? And I need to write as authentically as I can. And Karen needs to write as authentically as she can. And Kirsten and Gabriella. And, you know, we all just need to, because our stories are so important. They're going to be so similar. Like, we all understood fry planting. We all understood drums. And we all got severely pissed off at Unity Day. But I could trust and believe. I will go in Gabriella's house and she will make a plate of fried plantain for me with my shoes off at the door as, you know, a proper guest, as a well-behaved person who was raised right. So my ancestors don't kill me in my sleep. I will go to your house and I will eat your fried plantain. And it will be very different from my fried plantain. Right? It's going to be very different from Kare's fried plantain. I'm quite certain Kirsten has a different recipe too. And you'd be like, they just slice the plantain and you throw it in some oil, and it's like, no, it's very, very different. It's very, very tasty, but it's very, very different, right? I don't want everybody to learn my recipe, and when I come in your house, is my food I tasted? No. Because that is the beauty of life.
I think that was a lovely analogy for why it's important that everybody writes their own stories.
I have a story I need to give you about my mother and rice, and a comment in a food group about a project, and my mother, all lives mattered. Fucking rice dish.
You could give me that story after. Sidel, would you like to give your closing thoughts?
Sure. My closing thoughts. I really enjoyed this book. I'm very glad it was a recommendation. I'm passing it on next to my best friend to read. It felt very good and empowering and almost cathartic to see her come to the end and find a solution that, although requires her own sacrifice, is still seeking the truth and still seeking justice for all, in a way that doesn't compromise the greater good, but really honors it. I really enjoyed seeing her reclaim the stories of the women of her past, of her history, her lineage, and move towards reinstating that. It was good. It just good storytelling. Really good storytelling, really good empowering and personal storytelling. It touched my heart in a different kind of way. Yeah, I think well written, well received. I wanted to say this. I love the little romance. I am romance deprived and starved and just like forever alone, which is great, and #quarantine. But I enjoyed how it was written because I forgot some of the excitement of knowing you like someone in a room, and catching their eye across the room, and I forgot how exciting and fun that can feel, and experiencing it through her, and some of that push and pull of just really not even a lustful but true admiration for both Dio and for Sanjeet, and seeing these boys become men and not toxic, sick, dirty, lustful creatures, but truly start to blossom into men and find themselves in manhood was just, perfect. Just sublime.
Thank you.
in that toxic masculinity.
Free.
So, would I have picked up this book? I don't know. I'm not really the biggest fantasy fan, but I like that I was pushed because of the group to read something more. Oh, I'm so sorry, my dog. Come here.
That's okay.
Pushed to read. She always wants to play when like it's inappropriate. But pushed to read something that I wouldn't necessarily read because I'm the resident sci-fi fan. But I'm so glad that I read it because I think the writing was beautiful. And there were so many beautiful mirror moments. You know, it was the fact that Tarisai, and if I'm getting pulled, it's the dog. But anyway, Tarisai looks just like the lady. So you have this mirror image, but they're so entirely different. And then the themes of, you know, wanting a parent's love and affection, but at what cost? And at what time do you deviate from what would make our parents proud to what we believe is truly right? And so there was the mirror moment between the lady. Also, towards the end, in the beginning, when she was rushing to the child's palace, her arm disappears from traveling. And then at the very end, she has to face that once again to an even greater extreme. But she does so without, I mean, maybe there was a little hesitation, but then she went, you know? So there were just these moments that were mirrored so beautifully in her writing that I really appreciated as a writer. And then lastly, just representation. Like I said, you know, making a choice or identifying whatever your sexuality is, whether asexual, bisexual, I think that was represented here. Also, the choice to have children. You know, I've chosen to make career, you know, a goal in my life. And I think that's important. And to see that Tarisai was like, you keep talking about me having babies, but like, no, I'm going to be the best damn judge you've ever seen. I was like, yes. So I love the representation. I love the beautiful mirror moments. And at the end, it's just nature versus nurture. It's like, do you live up to what other people want you to be? Or when do you come of age and do what is right? And make those hard decisions, because sometimes what's right isn't directly clear. And sometimes it's kind of ambiguous. And I think there was a lot of moral ambiguity here, because these are complex issues of mending of cultures as well as the unification. So all in all, I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. And I'm glad I stepped out of my comfort zone.
Sheena.
All right, so I'm gonna pound on the leadership thing again, right? So let me start first of all. Like, I probably would have never picked up this book. This is like I've been saying, like with the quarantine and everything, I've been so focused on studying leadership and trying to hone my skills for my work, because I am a growing leader. Like I just recently went from, you know, having to lead, you know, from like me, myself, and I to like 200 people. Now it's like 2,000 people, and it's in having to learn how to grow and kind of become a leader like that has just been an obsession of mine, because I have to practice it in real life. And so it was really refreshing and interesting, I think, to pick up this book because, you know, because of the representation and because it was so different from all the other fiction that is out there today that is mainstream fiction, right? And I feel like this is what we need more of. We need more voices and diverse cultures and things like that. And so for me, I felt like one of the big themes here was, you know, being a female of color, right? Like we need to be confident and grow to become confident in our voices as leaders, as people that participate in this world society. And, you know, and I kind of felt like one of the big epiphanies towards the end of the story for me was that, you know, Tarisai, she takes this position through all of it that, you know, I'm trying to become this leader. I'm trying to become this person who's going to be a Raybearer. And the way that I'm going to do this is, you know, by putting aside everything I've been told. And I'm going to achieve this by celebrating diversity, unity through diversity. And I really love that. I think this other thing that I really liked too was just this concept of familial issues, right? So having this really complicated relationship with the lady and having that total built like rejection from her youth to, you know, coming to her friends. And I feel like a lot of folks, especially from the LGBTQ community, I totally identify that, where, your friends become your chosen family. And, I just really appreciated the fact that, this was kind of that same story, in a slightly different light. And it was really, really relatable in that realm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kirsten.
Okay, I'm gonna keep mine really, really short just because I do actually have to go to work. But I did really, really enjoy this book. I have another book club that I'm a part of at my store, so I will be choosing this one for that book club as well, to share with my friends there. But yeah, I really liked the representation and like the world building that pulled me into this universe where I felt at home. It that really hit me hard. And also the finding your own purpose, despite what other people think your purpose should be, and finding it in your own way. I really like that as well. Yeah,
Thank
pretty
you.
much that.
Gabriella. Oh, Gabriella, I can't hear you.
Muted. Unmuted. So obviously I love the book. I inhaled it. I think from the first page where she says she's stolen a sack of mangoes to run away from home, and I was like, oh, I get this kid. I feel this. Like, my grandma had mango trees in the backyard. Like, I was like, okay, I'm on board. Me and this kid, we're gonna vibe. And like, really the whole beautiful tapestry of the world and how it really celebrated all of the differences and how it made celebrating the differences and not ironing them all out made everything better. And I think explicitly like having that message meant a lot, particularly like at the point that we're all reading this, post all of the summer Black Lives Matter stuff in the US, like seeing that like all these differences aren't frightening and scary, they're actually good things was really meaningful to me. And I really liked the romantic part of it. We didn't like lean on it a lot during the discussion, but it's come a bit. I liked how, given the complicated ties of the Ray and her own relationship with her parents and Sanjeet's relationship with his mother and his father, they were both like, we want this relationship, but if it's going to destroy you and who you are, then I don't want that either. And I really, in a YA book, I liked that they weren't just flinging themselves at it like two idiots in love, which you see a lot, which I get scenes, like, I respect it. But I love that they were both like, we're not going to let this love destroy us the way it destroyed everyone else in our lives. And I love that. That was great.
Thank you. Oh shit, that leaves me. I want to thank Gabriella for recommending this book. It was definitely on my to-be read list, and it got shot all the way up to the top of the list because book club. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to read it. I recently started a mentorship with ALA, and so now I'm training and kind of learning the ropes of becoming an agent so that in a couple of years I could take on my own clients. And I do mean a couple of years. But one of the things I've been struggling with recently is creating a manuscript wish list. And this book is going on it. And I think that that's the best way I could summarize how I feel about this book. The thing, like, I agree with everything that's been said. Obviously, we talked a lot about its themes of imperialism, colonialism, what unity is and isn't, the diversity and how lovely it was, the kind of familial relationships that we're so familiar with, and what language is and means to us and to each other. But something that I feel it's not that it's not seen in YA or adult SFF, but this young woman took on a huge oppressive system and began to dismantle it.
Hello?
And it's so easy for that to be a heavy-handed book and to be like a very social justice-y kind of like really pushing an agenda kind of book, where, I mean, I'm with that agenda for sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't want to read it like that. I don't want to read an experience like that. I want something that makes me feel emotionally connected. And I was so happy that this book tackled such a huge thing, and such huge gaze without being heavy-handed, right? Like I could certainly now looking back on the book say that these were the themes and these were the things that happened. But while I was reading, it was really just a young woman's journey to claim her own voice. And that is something I think a lot of women of color and girls of color really feel and understand. And that was my favorite thing about this. Yeah.
I think it was so blended into the world building, just so seamlessly that it didn't feel like an agenda. It felt like this is a world with problems that are parallel to ours.
Yeah. Which is good fantasy. It's good fantasy. It's good movie. It's good writing. It's really good writing. Yeah. So for all those watching, I'm going to end the broadcast now. Thank you for sticking with us for so long. I definitely know some of the husbands were. And we'll see you in 2 weeks where we'll be reading and talking. Well, we would have read and we will be talking about The Marrow Thieves, which was Shayna's pick. And oh my God, I started reading it. Oh. Listen, the tears that I've already had. Anyway, bye, folks.
I have it, so I'll read it right before we talk.